In this episode of FT Monthly, we're going to take a look at Tim Ballard. Some new accusations. What do I think of those? And do I regret my articles on Tim Ballard in the last couple months? I'll let you know on that. Also, how often do men think of the Roman Empire? I have some thoughts on that. They may not be what you think, and it might not be as serious as you think, or maybe it's less serious than you think. And finally, hey, is demon possession back with a vengeance in the West, or are we just normalizing mental illness in a way that is unhealthy for our culture? That and more on FT Monthly this week. All right, welcome back to the program, our fourth installment of FT Monthly, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. September just flew by for me. It came this week, and I was like, oh my goodness, is this week is the week to record FT Monthly. So maybe it flew by for you as well. One of the reasons it flew by is because I was able to go to Texas, Salado, Texas, with Dr. Tim Stratton, and he was able to share a talk on Are Atheists Really Free Thinkers? We do have the video of the talk on the YouTube channel, but I do want to preface it with one thing. Some of the audio quality got messed up because of the technical difficulties we had at the venue. We're looking for another recording. We think they might have been able to do one there that we're able to get, but for now, that's the best that we have. So take a look at that. I'll link it in the description below. But let's get into it. All right, our top three topics today. Our first one is the Roman Empire. How often do you think of the Roman Empire? Maybe you've seen this going around on social media, on TikTok. I don't do TikTok, but some people do. I've seen on Instagram this idea that women walk around and ask men, how often do you think of the Roman Empire? And men go, oh, actually once a week or every day I think about the Roman Empire. And the question is this really accurate, or just men are men toying with women? So I thought I would answer the question, how often do I think of the Roman Empire? And it's a lot more than you would think that I would. And part of the reason for that is when you study theology and you're reading the New Testament and the Bible and church history, guess where you're always in? You're always in the midst of the Roman Empire. And I think, for me at least, that's the reason why I think about it constantly, is because when I'm reading a gospel or when I'm reading a book about Jesus, the Roman Empire is always in the background somewhere. There's always something going on. In fact, I had a conversation with someone recently about something that happened in the Gospels. And one of the responses I had to them was, look, we have to remember that this was written in a specific time period to a specific type of people. And so we've got to talk about that first before we can get to an application for our time period and our type of people. And so that's what makes me think of the Roman Empire a lot. But here's the thing. Do I think men think of the Roman Empire a lot just in general? I don't know. Maybe not. If they do, I have a theory on this. And again, starting today with a little bit of levity. If they do, I think the reason might be it's the one area in history where men can think about it. It feels manly. There's a lot of war and there's a lot of philosophy and things. Well, is philosophy manly? I don't know. I think it is. But there's a lot of that going on in history. And you don't get a lot of reactions of, but there's some pretty awful people. I mean, think about the Revolution. You think about the Civil War. You think about all these things that men like to think about: war, World War I, World War II. Just what's going on in those things with America. We often get hit with, but there are some problematic things that happened around then. And the Roman Empire is the last vestige of history that we can just think about and have fun with and not have to worry about the but. I think that might be it. I don't know. What do you think? I could be completely off. So I just wanted to start off with that topic today. I think about it a lot. How much do you think about it? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe men just think about the Roman Empire a lot because we like empire and dressing in robes. I'm just kidding. We don't like dressing. At least I don't. That's enough of that. All right. Topic number two. Topic number two is a little bit more serious. It's this war on marriage. Now, I wrote an article a few months ago called In Defense of Marriage. And really, it's about the redefinition of marriage, the redefinition of marriage, of the Obergefell decision in 2014, and earlier than that of no fault of force. Now, how marriage has been redefined, and we need to be defending marriage. one of the things I will say about this as well is that attack has mostly been coming from the left side of the aisle. Remember, Black Lives Matter said that their one of their goals was to destroy the nuclear family, and Marxism in general wanted to destroy the nuclear family so that it could control the populace, and it could encourage the revolution. So that's coming from the left. That's what I usually am responding to. But here's the thing about this is that now there's something coming from the right side of the aisle that I didn't necessarily anticipate. And so I think about this with things like let's say woke and racism. I saw this funny comedy sketch recently about a guy wearing a t-shirt that says woke on it, and another guy wearing a blue t-shirt says racist on it. And they just all of a sudden become great friends because they realize that they believe the same things. They believe in segregation. They believe that some races are more superior than others. They believe that we need to judge people based on their race and see it. And so it's just kind of a humorous take on that. It's just a definition of, well, the pendulum swinging all the way to the other side, and all of a sudden you realize I'm actually saying the same exact things as my opponent. That's what I think my opponent is. And so I think some of this is happening on the right when it comes to marriage, that it's swinging all the way on the other side because of all these redefinitions of marriage, the destruction of the institution that our society has partaken in. And now there's some swinging all the way on the other side. This is called the red pill movement. You ever heard of the red pill movement? There's a woman who is really a central focal point of the movement. She's like an anti-feminist, a pro-male commentator. Her name is Pearl Davis, Pearl Davis, and she has some opinions on this. And she recently got in a dust up with the Daily Wire, which is a conservative platform, conservative political commentary, social commentary website. And so she got in a dust up with them about marriage and why men are afraid to get married in our culture today. And I want to touch on this because I think that the sides are talking past each other because the prognosis and the diagnosis is correct, but the prescription for what to do to fix it is not. And I want to jump into this real quickly. I pulled some screen grabs of some tweets from Pearl and some others to kind of dissect. And then I want to talk about something that none of them are talking about and something that I think the church needs to do in response to this. So this is the pendulum swinging all the way to the other side. So here's the first overlay that we're going to look at here today. So this is Pearl Davis. You can find her on Twitter, Pearly Things, or X, whatever you call it now. And she says this: would you ever sign a business contract? Your business partner was paid to leave. You're not a real man if you don't take the risk. That's a response to Jeremy Boring of the Daily Wire. And then she also says, no, it's not an attack on marriage, to point out that it's too risky for men today. Why don't you instead pressure lawmakers to lower the risk? Then a guy named Troy Francis, I don't know who he is, but he weighs in on the debates. He says, the Trads, Matt Walsh blog, that's Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. I don't know that I would call him a traditional conservative, but that's what they're calling him, are losing the argument over marriage with Pearly Things because they refuse to confront modern realities that are fully apparent to everyone. They would prefer men go to the slaughterhouse with a backpack of denial and a cheery smile. So first thing, marriage is not just a contract. Some people respond to that's a covenant between two people. And the second thing is the Daily Wire's responses to Pearly Things are the assumption that she hates marriage and doesn't think marriage is good. But she clearly thinks marriage is a good thing, but that society has ruined it. And I want to come at it from that angle and not just say, oh, you're disparaging marriage, because I think that's actually not all that helpful to say, hey, you're disparaging marriage. I think it's helpful to say, what are you actually saying? And I think what she's actually saying is that in our culture, in our society right now, that marriage has been devalued and men now are getting the short end of the stick. And that may or may not be true. I'm not here to argue whether or not that's true one way or the other. I know a lot of women that would say the other side is equally at fault. And so I don't want to necessarily get into that conversation, not because I think it's not important to have. I do think it's important to have, but it's not my goal in the conversation. We got a couple more overlays to look at here. Here's the second one. This is Pearl Davis responding to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro says, marriage is good and you should get married. Marriage will make you a better person. You should date with an eye toward marriage, seeking commonality of values, the single most important foundation for a lasting marriage. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, so she responds with, Ben, this is an irresponsible take. If you're encouraging men to sign up for a system that profits off of false accusations, alimony, and child support, we'll get into that in a little bit. Men are 8 times more likely to commit suicide after divorce. This is a death sentence for millions of men every year. She responds to a different Ben Shapiro quote, who says, as for the argument that no-fault divorce is bad, I agree. No-fault divorce is bad because marriage is good. The answer to no-fault divorce is not avoidance of marriage. It's a solid marriage, and that's about partner selection and shared values. And then she says there's a little bit of grammar. I think she means to say, just sign up to be financially and emotionally abused, no matter how bad it is. Just pray harder. Okay, so I think they're talking past each other here, because Ben is very pro-traditional marriage, and Pearl is saying things like, well, marriage has been destroyed by society, and so that's why men are afraid to get married, and men should be afraid to get married because, look, the 8 times more likely to commit suicide after marriage. The family court system usually benefits women, especially in blue states. And so why are you encouraging men to get married when they're just going to get taken advantage of? That's her point. Ben's point is marriage is good. It's a good thing. You should just seek common values and you'll probably have a good marriage. Okay, point taken. Now slide 3, and then we'll get into what I think. Slide 3, this is how you know Pearl doesn't necessarily believe that marriage is a bad thing, because she says real wives do exist. They are out there. But we cannot identify the real wives if we have too many of these pretend ones that make their husbands miserable for a lifetime. So one of Pearl's attacks is that a lot of women just make their husbands miserable. Even if the marriage doesn't end in divorce, it makes their husbands miserable, and it's cheaper to stay married than to get a divorce for the man, so he just stays miserable for the rest of his life. And that's one of her takes. So the other tweet said, no, it's not an attack on marriage, to point out it's too risky for men today. Why don't you instead pressure lawmakers to lower the risk? Okay, so what do I think on the topic? Now, first, I want to say I have a very small platform compared to any of these people, but I do want to say to Pearl, if you want to have a conversation about what I'm about to say, I would love to have a conversation about it with you. I don't want to just talk about you, but I understand you've got a much larger platform than I do, and that might not be something that's interesting. But I will say this. One of the ways that I want to respond is not just as an American male looking at the marriage system in America. I do agree, no fault divorce, redefine marriage in a poor way. And Obergefell redefined marriage in a poor way as well. We have devalued the institution of marriage to where now people just call it a contract. Well, maybe we can just get into it and then get out of it as we see fit. And then you can take half of the assets. I get that. I get that that's what we've done in society. It pains me that that's what we've done in society. But I want to respond by saying this. Pearl claims, and I'm just going to take her at her word, claims that she's a Christian conservative. Okay. And I don't know what her theology is, but I'm going to take her at her word from some of the things that I've seen her say, that she believes in Jesus Christ and is a Christian conservative. And I want to come at it in this way, because I want to specifically focus on the church. Now, one of the things I want to say is the church great at marriage? No, the church has not been historically great at marriage. We need to be better. But there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is marriage as an institution is actually started in the Garden of Eden before the fall. God introduces marriage before the fall. He says the words, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, before the fall. So it's an institution intended for humanity without sin. Okay, that's why marriage is so hard. It's instituted before the fall, and it's continued after the fall, and we do it very, very poorly. Half of the Old Testament, you can see how bad they are at marriage in a lot of the Old Testament. Jesus reiterates marriage in the New Testament between one man, one woman, and for one lifetime. And he even gives some allowance for divorce, especially infidelity. And he says, hey, because you're a hard-hearted people, God said, okay, this is how I'm going to regulate divorce. And so Jesus recognizes that as well. And then fast forward all the way to Revelation, and we see the likeness of marriage being compared to Jesus coming for his bride, the church. So all of that to say, the church must double down on marriage. It cannot acquiesce. The church must not play into the risks of marriage and say, men, just don't get married. The church cannot do that. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Scripture mandates people to be married. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Paul makes an argument that if you're going to do ministry, it might be better for you to remain unmarried. I get that. So it's not necessarily mandated to be married, but I will say it's essential for the church to practice marriage in general. It is essential for the church to show what good marriage looks like, because if we're going to be salt and light, and marriage is supposed to be a picture of Christ in the church, then we must then participate in it. It is essential for us to do that. And so because of that, we cannot encourage men not to get married. We cannot encourage men just to look at relationships as faulty or to just weigh the risks, because the risks of men not marrying is much greater than the risks of all the men getting married. Now, Pearly Things might come back, or Pearl Davis, she might come back and say, yeah, but I'm just commenting on why men are hesitant to get married. And I get that. I understand that. I think some women are hesitant to get married. I think it's because we have destroyed the institution. So then the question becomes, who fixes the institution? Who is supposed to fix this institution of marriage? And that is where I think the prescription is off from Pearl's side, because she's saying, well, it's up to secular society. We need to fix the laws. We need to vote for the right people, fix the laws, and get the family court system fixed. And I say, you cannot ask a secular society to fix a religious covenant relationship. It cannot work. It does not work. They just end up breaking it even more. And so if we're waiting for secular society to fix the laws, to fix things like that, then we're going to be waiting a long time. We're going to be waiting a long time because it's never going to happen. The reason marriage is what it is in the West is because it was instilled by Judeo-Christian ethics. It was instilled by an idea that men love their wives as Christ loved the church, and wives submit to their husband. Now, was that abused over time? Absolutely. But the idea of marriage as a covenant relationship meant for rearing a family and procreation and discipleship is what formed the West into what it is and what it was. And the destruction of marriage, as Karl Marx saw, was a way to destroy the West from the inside out. And so incidentally, I think what Pearl is recognizing is that the destruction of marriage is happening. So maybe we should just wait for it to get fixed, or insist that it get fixed before we participate. I think the opposite is true. I think the goal of the church should be, yes, marriage is hard. Yes, marriage is imperfect, but we're going to hold you to a higher standard. We're going to say, no, we must look better in marriage, especially in the West, if we in any way want to reestablish the moral systems of Western culture. It must start and end with reestablishing what true marriage is in the church first. That's the place to go first. The church must reestablish and double down on marriage. Marriage is hard. It's supposed to be hard because it's a remnant of what life should have been like, and it's looking forward to what life will be like. It's this picture that's stuck in the middle of two perfect worlds, and we're two imperfect beings trying to adequately and accurately display what this picture is supposed to look like. And because of that, it is difficult, and because of that, it is broken, and because of that, it is risky. And marriage being risky is part of the thrill. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you just get married and divorce can just never be on your mind. And I get that. My wife and I have had similar conversations. But it is foolish to not recognize that we are also both human, and things might happen that start to make us shake and waver. That's why our pursuit of Christ is more important than our pursuit of each other. The second thing that I'd like to point out in this regard is, if marriage is supposed to be the salt part of the discipleship, then we need to encourage it in a healthy way. And I get that Pearl is trying to be an advocate for people she doesn't think they have advocating for. And I don't want to get into this this conversation of, well, you're not old enough. I've been married for 15 years. I'm only 36 years old. One of her things was, hey, come and talk to me when you've been married for 50 years. I get that. And then the response to her is, well, you're not even married. Why do you have an opinion? I don't like those things, because you can have an opinion on something that you're not participating in. You can also have an opinion on something you haven't finished yet. All right. So that doesn't mean my marriage is going to last in the way that I hope it does, but it does mean that I have a goal towards that. And I have people to look at. My parents are still married. Has their marriage been difficult? Absolutely. Are they still together? Do they still love each other? Yes. My in-laws still married. Same thing. Marriage is difficult. Marriage is hard. It's supposed to be. That's part of the issue. The other thing is, when you get into marriage, you're looking for the ideal, and you're going to keep working towards that. It's a sanctifying process. If you keep working towards that ideal, you're going to find joy in the end. But if you just think the ideal should happen, then you're going to have problems, right? And this is what happens too when we say, well, it's too risky. Well, what if you get married and your spouse gets cancer the next day and then is going to pass away? Was that worth the risk? And I say, yes, it is. If we're ever going to disciple a culture back into morality, it's got to start. It's got to start with understanding that marriage is not only beneficial for society, but it is necessary for society, especially in the Judeo-Christian ethic. Can the church do better? Absolutely. Can the church do better to impact the culture on the issue? Absolutely. But simply responding by saying, well, it's too risky, men shouldn't get married right now because the court system is screwed up, I don't think is the right answer. I don't think it's the right answer because of the reasons I've said, especially if you are a Christian that believes in the things that God has ordained on this earth. The picture of marriage being Christ and the church means that the church ought to support, identify, and encourage marriage. All right. Pearl, if you see this, I don't know why you ever would, but if you see this, I'd love to have a discussion about that topic with you if you are interested. All right, let's go to our last topic. Mental health or demonic possession. I have a video to show you, but before I do that, I would love to invite you to like, share, and subscribe this video. Hopefully it's helpful to you, and would love to interact with you as well. I want to show this video, and then I got a few things to talk about.
Hey, who's fronting?
Jay.
Yeah. Hey, who's fronting?
Well.
Hey, babe.
Yeah.
Who's fronting?
Jenna.
Hey, who's fronting?
Caleb.
Yes. Hey, who's fronting?
Say Anthony.
And just so you know, it wasn't when he walked in the door.
Nope. So, definitely not.
Yeah, we switched. So.
All right. So if you don't know what's going on there, I don't blame you. But what is going on there is, you can see in the initial clip, it says they have DID. That's dissociative interpersonality disorder. And it used to be called multiple personality disorder. And so what she has is multiple personality. So the question I have, as you look at this, and he can correctly identify which personality is fronting or showing or controlling who she is in the moment. And some of them are female, some of them are male. They've got names. And so he's able to correctly guess which one. And they're very proud of this, right? It looks like they're very, very proud of it. And so the question that I have is, could this be demon possession? Or is it simply the normalization of mental health issues? What do you think? I would love to hear what you think. You can drop a comment below. What do you think? What do you think about that? Is it demon possession? Is it not? We can talk about that. Before I share with you, pause, enter a comment. Which one do you think it is? All right. Drum roll for me. I don't know. I think it could be both. I think it could be either or both. I don't know if this woman is demon possessed. I'm not going to say she is. I do think sometimes in our Western culture, especially as Christians who want to talk a lot about reason and logic, we tend to kind of put on the back burner the spiritual warfare aspect of it, and we shouldn't, because I want to talk specifically about the fact that I think that this shows us that it is demonic in a sense. And this is the sense it's demonic. Now, is she possessed? She could be. I don't know. Maybe We Are Legion looks a little bit different in 2023 than it did in the first century. I'm not sure. I'm not going to make that proclamation of whether or not she is, but I will say this. I will say that it is demonic in kind. And the reason I say that is because God is a God of order, not disorder. God is a God of order and not chaos. And what this is playing into disorder and into chaos, not only normalizing it, but celebrating it. This man can identify my different personalities. Isn't that awesome? What you need is help. What you need is help with your disorder. What you need is spiritual guidance. That's what you need. And so one of the things that the technical Satanists will say is, do what thou wilt. That's the Anton LaVey line. Do what thou wilt. Now they'll say, well, I don't believe in God. We don't actually believe in Satan. We don't believe in Baphomet. That's just our symbol of you can do what you want. And we like that. It's taken, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. And so we want to reign in our bodies now and do whatever feels good to us because materialism is the way to go. And the ironic part of that is exactly the message of Satan. They get it exactly right. They are actually worshiping Satan. Satan doesn't care if they believe whether or not he exists at all. Satan doesn't care about that at all. He just cares that they do that. They completely look inside so that they don't look above and see who their savior is. And so they are playing into it whether they realize it or not. And so I'll say this about this particular video. I think one of the issues here is we are normalizing and celebrating mental illness. And since God is a God of order and not a God of chaos, we must not do so. We need to buck against this. We need, as the church, to come up and say, nope, not today. This is satanic. It is technically satanic. And you need to find Jesus. It's not the meme. You need Jesus, but it is you need to find Jesus because there is hope beyond yourself. If you're just going to look inside yourself and you say, well, I'm stuck with this personality disorder, so I'm going to play into it. That's what our culture wants you to do. That's what Satan wants us to do. And so if you're just going to do that, then I don't think that you are going to be able to find fulfillment or experience that in the future in your life. And so because of that, because Satan, when he speaks, lying is his native tongue. When he talks, he is the one that is talking lies. He can't talk the truth. He can't talk order. He can only talk chaos. And because of that, you can see as our culture continues to swing, and I talk about this in my article on post-Christianity, as our culture continues to swing into a post-Christian milieu, we are going to see stuff like this on the rise. It's paganistic at its heart, but it's going to have language of Christianity, of love and of fulfillment and of grace. Why don't you just let them live the way that they want to live? Because it is not orderly. It is disordered, and disorder needs to be reordered. What do you think? Love to see you drop a comment below. All right, on to our main thing. All right, our main thing, Tim Ballard. Now, I thought I was done with this. Part of the reason I thought I was done with this because I wrote an article on Sound of Freedom. If you haven't seen the movie, it's a movie about child trafficking. I got some pushback on the article, so I did a deep dive. In fact, got to talk to somebody with some knowledge of how OUR and Tim Ballard operates. I did a deep dive on the topic and wrote another article on Tim Ballard called The Ballard of Truth, and I'll link both of those in the description below. And so I thought, oh, good, I'm done with this. This took a lot of my life, a lot of talking with people online. I'm ready to move on to other things. Well, wouldn't you know it, in the middle of August, all of a sudden, Tim Ballard is accused of certain things. So some of the accusations that he is dealing with right now is that he did this couple's ruse and he would use emotional manipulation to earn sexual favors from the females he's working with, things like showering with him and asking things like, if you want to save kids, how far are you willing to go? These are all allegations. They're not proven yet, but it is disturbing. It's disturbing for a few reasons. Now, he's been accused of that. He's been accused of other things. As I look at in my article, you see that he does have a history of fabricating stories and passing them off as truth and that sort of thing. Now, full disclosure, Tim did respond on Instagram with a few videos, one of himself, one of a lady. And so I want to play these videos, and then I'm going to respond to them, hopefully in a way that helps you understand what I'm thinking. Because one of the things that I've had to ask is, do I regret writing that review on Sound of Freedom? And do I regret not going harder on Tim Ballard and the Ballard of Truth? And I'll respond to that. But first, I want to take a look at these videos real quickly that Tim posted on his Instagram. Okay, so this is the first one in response to the allegation.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about a very important undercover tactic that we use that involves female operators. Based on the allegations that are flying around and the questions being asked, we've decided to tell you these tactics. While I do so, I'm going to pay homage, respect, love, and gratitude for these female operators who serve such an important role in rescue operations. You need to understand that children don't just fall out of the sky. They don't fall into your desk. It's a very proactive work. So if I am a man or one of my operators approached by a trafficker trying to put a child to service on that person, or a sex worker, and that man, that operator doesn't partake of what's being offered, they lose credibility. And so we came up with a concept that we call the couple's ruse or the couple's tactic, where you go in together pretending to be a husband or a wife or boyfriend, girlfriend. Now you go in and one of you could pretend that, yes, I want to partake in this sex act with this woman or this child, but I can't because my girlfriend won't let me, but maybe we can do it later. So is that cool? Like, let's keep talking and she'll warm up to it eventually. But the bottom line is we block for each other. So the trafficker sees the situation, recognizes that I have every excuse not to partake. Hundreds, maybe thousands of children have been rescued using this amazing tactic. As I've had these talks over the last several weeks with these amazing, heroic female operators, they want their voices heard. They want you to know what it's been like for them working with me and other operators. You, the supporters, it's time for you to look under the hood and you can make your own decision about these tactics. But I want to pay homage to these female operators. I want to give them their opportunity to tell their story and bear their witness to the amazing work that they have done working with our teams. So please, over the next several days, listen to their testimonies, listen to the work they've done, and thank God for them for rescuing these children.
All right, so there's his response, and we'll get into the young lady that also posted a response on his Instagram. Here's what I'll say is, initially it sounds good, but then you look at the history of OUR, you look at the history of Tim Ballard and some of the things that he's made up and some of the stories that he's fabricated. It's very sad because in a lot of ways you want to jump on board because you don't want kids being hurt. But as you listen to it, as you look at it, and as you start to logically think through, well, what's the couple's ruse and what's it going to do, and the history of Tim Ballard kind of eschewing accountability, from what I understand, the history of that lends me to think that there's more to be said concerning this couple's ruse or whatever it is. And the fact that he's going so hard at being oddly unspecific about what it looks like and like the scenario he plays out, I just don't know if I buy it. I don't know if I buy what he's saying because there have been so many other times where he's been caught in just fabricating stories about what he does and what OUR has done. And so that's part of it. Now he has a lady come on. Now, the last time I checked his Instagram, this was the only lady that had posted something on his Instagram or in general. So I haven't seen other ones. There might be other ones. I haven't seen other ones, but here's a lady that apparently says that she was on one of these and used a couple's ruse, and I want to take a look at it real quick and respond.
Hey there, my name is Natalia, and I have been an undercover operator with OUR for over a year. I worked on various missions with Tim Ballard specifically, ranging from different countries, different continents. And during my time working with Tim, there has been zero inappropriate behavior, any sexual contact, any inappropriate sexual contact whatsoever before, during, or after a mission. Everything was kept very respectful, very professional. In fact, I think the OUR team went above and beyond to make sure the safety of both the operators and the victims and anybody involved in a mission. During my time in our different missions, we had to deploy different tactics depending on the scenarios, one of which was the couples rouge, which involved us posing as a couple. During those missions specifically, there was again absolutely zero sexual contact, touching, anything inappropriate of that nature. Everything was very much professional and respectful through and through from start to finish.
Okay, so I have no reason to doubt what she's saying. I'm not going to disparage her. They blurred her face, which I think is a good idea and a good thing. So I'm not going to say, well, she's lying. She's obviously lying because Tim Ballard made her lie or that he paid her off. Those are things that I'm not going to say. But what I will say is this. Just because she had a good experience doing this doesn't mean that the allegations aren't true. It doesn't mean the allegations aren't true. And I think that that is really important to understand, that those allegations come from specific people. And because of Tim Ballard's history of not wanting to be held accountable for certain things, and because OUR actually asked him to leave, and we found out that when I wrote that article, and because of this, we have reasons to question whether or not he has done some of these things. Now, I'm going to read this quote from the Salt Lake Tribune. It's an article on the topic. And it says this: in a 2021 interview with investigators, Stockwell recounts how Matt Osborne, who is currently now OUR's president and chief operating officer, and he began telling her, "We both know that we don't rescue here anymore. We both know that we hardly rescue abroad anymore." This falls in line with similar things that I've been hearing from the person, the contact that I had was started out as a noble endeavor, because just saw all these kids and wanted to help in some way. Started as a noble endeavor, but because he's a good talker, because he's good at fundraising, all of a sudden it ballooned before he could assess his character, and it was character exposing. And all of a sudden things were happening. He was speaking and going all these sorts of places, going to testify before Congress, and the money that they were raising wasn't necessarily being used for these operations. Now, this lady says she's worked for a year and she worked with Tim Ballard on some of these. I have no reason to doubt that she's done that. I'm not going to say that she hasn't done that. But I will say that given the history and given what's going on currently, and the Mormon Church has disassociated itself with Tim Ballard, and Tim Ballard himself being a Mormon, and that's a big blow. That doesn't mean he's guilty, but it does mean that there's something more here than meets the eye. So I do want to say, I don't want to throw under the bus completely what he's done, the work that's happened, because good things can still happen from people who are doing them for bad reasons. But I will say also that as somebody who was the target of some malicious misinformation and some accusations that were untrue, and because of that, I part of me is saying, I get it. If these are false accusations, that stinks. So I don't want to say that 100% I believe everything that's happening either. But I do want to take into consideration the history of what has been established as factual and the way that Tim Ballard has talked, and say that these allegations seem credible. And so it's not looking good. It's not looking good for Tim Ballard. It's not looking good for OUR. They've distanced themselves from him. And so the question that I've had to ask myself is, do I regret writing that article on Sound of Freedom? Do I regret writing that article on Tim Ballard? And I don't. I don't regret those things. I do think Sound of Freedom still is a very good movie as far as cinematic quality goes. Some people don't like it. I think it's a really good story, very good storytelling. I do think that if one watches it, it should be watched as if it was complete fiction at this point. And I do think it has raised awareness in some aspects that has been helpful. And of course, it's raised awareness in some aspects that haven't been helpful. I also want to say that the only thing I regret is that I bought into the media narrative of, people are just trying to disparage this right-wing activist. And I usually pride myself on not falling into that hole, but it was so quick and so easy to just jump on board because you want to save these kids. And so that's one thing I'd say, I was wrong in that instance. And I recognized that pretty early while I was doing some investigation on Tim Ballard specifically. And in those conversations and in that research, it was very disheartening to see, you know what, I should have been more careful. Now, all of that to say, I don't regret writing those things because that's how I really felt in the moment. And so there will be some edits that come to those, and I don't want to hide behind the things that I've written in the past. I will timestamp those edits when I make them to say this is what's going on. I'm also not going to assume guilt on Ballard's case because I know that there are false accusations that happen and there are targeted media campaigns that happen. But I will consider the entire history, and I'm not going to stand idly by and say, hey, I think I was right all along, because I don't think I was. And I do think there are better opportunities to get involved with human trafficking. But I also want to point out that I do think this raised awareness for people who thought that trafficking was one thing, and then when they went down the rabbit hole, realized it's something else and have gotten involved. I've actually had personal conversations with people who have realized that and have gotten involved in other ways because of the movie Sound of Freedom. So it has had some of that effect. And I want to say finally that if you resist believing this and you think, oh, you're just falling for the mainstream propaganda, it's a media attack to disparage him and all, I get that. I understand. And I'm sensitive to that. But as somebody who wants to look for the truth in all situations, it's important not to just react because the side of the aisle I tend to identify with more seems to be carrying the water for somebody. I'm on the side of truth, not on the side of any particular agenda. The agenda that I'm on the side of is what is true and what is not. And so if this is true, then I have no ability to say otherwise. I must stand up and say, this is the truth. This is what's happening. And it is unfortunate. And we pray for those kids. And we hope people get justice. And especially if, as has been alleged, sexual improprieties have taken place, Tim needs to see the consequences of that. And he needs to reap the consequences of that. And also, if I also heard that a director on Sound of Freedom, I just kind of came across my I didn't read the article, but it came across my screen, has ended up pleading guilty to or admitting that he has inappropriately touched a teenage girl as well. And to say, you know what? I can't support that sort of behavior as a Christian, as somebody who believes in Jesus Christ, as somebody who believes in the dignity of the human being, who wants to stand for truth and for the right things. I've got to say no to that. And so that's my take on the Tim Ballard situation. You can read the articles that I'll post below, and really hope that the truth comes out, because I think that the truth will set you free, even if it's the truth that you don't want to hear, and sometimes especially if it's the truth that you don't want to hear. All right, that's all for today's show. If you're not following us on X or Twitter or whatever it is, we're at 999 followers on Twitter. So find FreeThink Inc. on Twitter and give us a follow, and you can get updates. We got a lot of stuff coming out. Super excited for the things that are going to be happening this fall and into the spring next year. And just want to invite you to continue to stay tuned to FT Monthly. We'll have snippets of episodes coming out throughout the month as well. God bless you. And of course, as always, stay reasonable.